Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Engagement Designer demo series. In the last episode, we went over the Workflow Drafts tab as part of the Administration Console. Now we're going to go over the Instances tab of the Administration Console. In this tab, you'll see things are a little bit more complex than the first tab of Workflows and the second tab of Workflow Drafts, where in this one we have a lot more going on as far as columns and buttons. From this tab, we are looking at all of the current running workflows or completed workflows within this Engagement Designer and this Avaya Breeze cluster. Right now, I have it currently searched on keyword of my developer name as to hide the other names of the current developers within this environment. So I only have one instance here showing. This instance shows an earlier completion of the workflow that I ran called Simple Workflow. The idea of the Instances tab is to show either a running workflow in real time, a completed workflow, or even an errored workflow to show where that workflow failed and try to figure out why it failed. To start, much like the other tabs, off to the right here, we have the ability to search based on keyword. We also have the ability to refresh the page and refresh the listed instances of this tab. We have the ability to show and hide columns within this tab by checking and unchecking the checkboxes here, and the ability to do multiple sort based on the columns. So I can sort by created at in either ascending or descending order, or I can change the column to something else. Right now I'm currently not sorting by anything, so I can sort by created at to show the most recent running workflow within the Instances tab. I can see here my simple workflow ran at exactly military time 13/12/31 on this date. I can see that it was completed successfully, and I did not successfully handle any errors because no errors occurred. I can also see which node of the Avaya Breeze cluster this exact instance ran on. Because of clusters, there can be multiple nodes, so it's important to list which node the exact workflow instance ran on. If the workflow is triggered based on a phone call coming in, I can see who was calling in and who they called. I can also see the version of the workflow, as well as the ID listed for that exact instance. This ID is very important when looking at multiple instances running, or looking at maybe triggering a specific instance if the instance is stuck based on an error or a receive task, which we will go over later in the Engagement Designer development tool. Now to go over the buttons that go with the Instances tab. If, for instance, one of these instances were to crash or fail, or maybe get stuck at something, I could actually check the checkbox here and click the continue button, which would try to force the workflow instance to continue even though an error may have occurred. If the workflow is stuck, let's say at an infinite loop, or it's stuck on something that maybe is causing my system to crash, I can have the checkmark or checkbox here checked and click the terminate button, which would then terminate that running instance of the workflow. Once a workflow is listed as terminated or completed, I can have it checked and then click the delete button, which would delete the record of that instance ever occurring. It would delete it from the Instance tab and then delete it from the Avaya Breeze cluster here. A special list button here is the Purge All button. The Purge All button will actually clear out any completed or terminated instances listed within the Instances tab here. So by clicking Purge All, if I were to have multiple lists of completed or terminated instances, Purge All would clean up those lists of records here. And that's very important to have if you have something that's maybe causing a clog, or if there's maybe too many records here to keep up with. Purge All is good to clear out some of those records. Archival will archive any listed instances here into a file for you. So you can click on Archival and it will actually save the working instance for you into an exported file. So I can see here I have some of the archives that I've listed within this lab here. You can sort by date and scheduling. You can actually schedule archival of lists of instances throughout the day, week, month, year, and even set the archivals and reset the archivals. The most important part of the Instances tab is the ability to look at any of the running instances in real time. So if I have the working instance here of Simple Workflow selected based on this check mark, I can click on any one of these hyperlinked tabs right here within these columns, and by simply clicking on it, it will open a new tab within Administration Console. giving the name of the workflow and the current version of that workflow. In the left here, I can see it's on auto refresh, and I can see the workflow's name as simple workflow. I can see the version of that workflow. I can see, again, the instance ID that was listed back on that Instances tab. And I can see the host IP, which is the IP address of that node within that Avaya Breeze cluster. Within the bottom here, I will get a live view of that instance running in real time, all the way from the start node through every individual task, all the way to the ending end nodes. The best part about this tab here is that I can see whether or not things fail, or I can even watch things fail within real time. So I can do things like debugging or error checking. I can see here my workflow successfully ran because everything is green. The three colors to know for the Instances running tab are green, yellow, and red. There may be a special case purple if a task was trying to run and was interrupted in between, but the green, yellow, and red will indicate successfully ran, currently running, and terminated with error. Green meaning successfully ran, yellow meaning currently running, and red meaning terminated with error. If I were to click on any of the tasks here, I can open up a new window within Engagement Designer Administration Console and see the exact input and output of that task. So for an example here, I have a send text message task. As part of the input, I see my sender for the SMS text message, which is the number of the SMS sender for my specific lab here. I can see the SMS body is hello world, as my example was earlier, and I can see who is the recipient of that SMS message, which is my personal cell phone here. The output is listed as SMS failed. That's just part of the Engagement Designer, so we can ignore that for this case here. The error message is something that we can define by attaching error message nodes to our task here. So we can give ourselves specific listing of ways the error may have occurred and show error output messages so we can do better things like debugging. We can also see the bundle of the task, as this one is listed from the communication tasks from Avaya Designer. This is part of the internal Avaya snap-in and the internal Avaya Engagement Designer snap-in, and that's what it's showing here with the bundle. Like I said, the important part to know within this tab is to show running workflow instances in real time. Here, I'll switch over to a new window where I'll be able to show a running workflow in real time and show some of the errors it may run into. In this new window, I have a new running instance, which is part of the workflow called Complex Workflow. If I click on the Complex Workflow button here, it will open the new tab within Administration Console and show this workflow running within real time. I can see that the beginning of this workflow successfully ran because all of the tasks here are marked green. For an example, clicking on the green play announcement task here will open this window to show that playing of the task and see the input and output of that play announcement task. As part of the input, I see it required a UCID, which is a unique caller ID, as part of Communication Manager. I can see the output was also that same UCID, and I can see that the task completed successfully. There was no error message, and just like the text message task, this one was also part of the Avaya Designer bundle. Now if I look, I can see there's also a yellow task sitting here. And this yellow task means that this task is currently running, and this receive task is actually a special one. The receive task is actually waiting for something to happen within this workflow. And in this example, this task is waiting for one of the people on this phone call to drop from the phone call. And then the Engagement Designer will decide based on who drops where the workflow will then continue. If I have my customer drop, it's going to continue down right here, and we'll see this run in real time and change all of these tasks from yellow to green. So you can see the gateways here change to green, and I can see now the task has moved down to here where the play and collect is waiting on the agent to press a number. So it's sitting at yellow until the agent presses a number, either 1 to reconnect with the customer or anything else to drop the customer's call. So if I press 1, it should move up and add the participant or add the customer back into this phone call. And I can see everything successfully completed and everything turned green. And now we are waiting again at this receive task where it's sitting at a yellow state, meaning that it is currently running. If, for example, I wanted to see an erroneous action, I could have my customer drop again, and I can see everything will then turn to yellow to green again, all the way back down to the play and collect. If the agent were to drop from this phone call of this workflow without pressing a number, we could see this task is actually going to turn the rest red. We can see it turns from yellow, and it tried to, based on that the agent did not press 1, the workflow tried to go to the disconnect, but seeing that there was nobody on the phone call, there was nobody able to receive the play announcement, so the play announcement actually turned red. And if I were to click on it, we can see that there was the correct input, but there was not a successful output, as we could not play media to a terminated phone call. So this is showing an example of how an error message can occur based on the task turning red. All this runs within this tab here, where I can see things run within real time, and I can see erroneous actions turn from green to yellow if they complete successfully, or as we showed in this example, from green to red if things fail. This is very helpful for when debugging a workflow, and you can see all these actions run within real time through multiple instances. Because if I were to have multiple instances listed here, I could actually open multiple tabs here. So it's very important to see all these tabs running in real time when it comes to things like I said, like debugging. Back in the Instances tab of the Administration Console, I can see that I have 3 instances of complex workflow, each one in a different state. I have one that completed successfully without running into any errors. That means that my agent and customer were able to connect and go through each step of the workflow without running into any errors or causing the workflow to fail. I have an error state instance of complex workflow, which means that this instance was able to find an error within my workflow and unable to completely succeed through the workflow itself. If I click on error here, I can see that it failed at this play and collect task and is sitting at red and will then finish in an error state. This means that I was unable to catch an error task or was unable to finish the workflow based on an interaction between my agent and my customer. Lastly, I have a current running instance of complex workflow that is showing active. This means that my complex workflow here is currently running and I have a current interaction between my customer and my agent. Right now, my customer is connected with my agent, and the workflow is currently waiting for either my customer or agent to drop from the call. We'll go over examples like this more in depth when we get into the Engagement Designer development tool and show how to create workflows just like this. But just as an example, I'm showing here the different states that your workflows can complete in. Either successfully completed, ran into an error and unsuccessfully completed, or currently running instance in an active state. All of this can be found within the Instances tab of Administration Console, and in the next episode, we're going to talk about how these instances are actually triggered based on events listed in the event catalog.